within Bhutan, I would say that entrepreneurship is now growing. It's a buzzing topic. There's a lot of other offices and stakeholders who are coming in, trying to understand entrepreneurship, trying to understand what our youths would be interested in.
BCG just projected Bangladesh to become a $1 trillion economy. PwC has projected that by 2030 and by 2060, India is going to be bigger than the US. That's something, right? We talk about regional blocks, but I think South Asia as a block is definitely very, very powerful.
Hello, everyone. On behalf of ANDE, a very, very warm welcome to all of you for the second session of day 2 of the third edition of the South Asia Convening in partnership with NAB Bangladesh. The video should have set a context, so I'm not going to take up too much time except to thank our panelists and all of you for joining us today. And with that, I will hand this over to our fabulous moderator for today, Mr. Farhad Reza.
Thanks, Sucharita. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I don't know where you are watching us from. Greetings from the National Advisory Board for Impact Investment in Bangladesh. Hope you all are well. Thanks to Aspen Network Development Entrepreneurs and Aspen Institute for creating this opportunity to discuss a topic which is very, very new. Thank you all for joining us at this cutting-edge population-weighted asset under management panel session. As most of you are probably aware, this topic is, as I mentioned, very, very new, untapped in the impact investment ecosystem. It seems like Star Trek, where no person has gone before, or it feels like Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong's moon landing. It was first raised by the National Advisory Board for Impact Investment in Bangladesh at the Global Steering Group for Impact Investment Global Leaders Forum in Istanbul in May 2023. Due to the interest it gained from that forum, particularly from population-heavy countries from Asia and Africa, an elaborated paper was presented by the NAB Bangladesh at the GSG Global Summit in Spain in October last year. NAB Bangladesh has been pushing this agenda since then, as we strongly believe the definition of a unicorn company should include its role to serve 1 billion people along with its billion-dollar revenue status. The expected outcomes from this session? Yes, the expected outcome from this session is to guide and recommend NAB Bangladesh in partnership with ANDE to prepare a comprehensive working paper on population-weighted asset under management. We hope to present that paper at the Global Steering Group Summit next year to share with its network to consider an adoption as guide for responsible asset under management. While one of our panel members today has identified this agenda as a social financial innovation, we were very impressed. Without delaying, I would like to request our panel members to introduce yourself and how you think your work, experience, and passion linked to this topic or agenda. We have few discussion questions for our panel members to set up the context, and then we will open the floor for question and answers. So introduction, starting with Assistant Professor Tasfia Tasneem Ahmed, followed by Professor Olaf Murlink and Nick Gorel, and finishing by Dr. Rahul Matthew Nimagata. I'll go to Professor Tasfia to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome. I'm Tasfiya Taslim Ahmed. I work at Bangladesh Institute of Governance and Management as an assistant professor. BIGM is an academic and research institute which mainly caters to public and private sector officials. We also conduct policy research. So while working on sustainability, inequality, and development, from an applied and empirical lens, I discovered that without using financial markets and without developing proper mechanisms, we probably cannot tap into our full development potential. From there, I started working with NAB on ESG and impact investment measurements. And I believe that population-weighted AUM, which is our topic for today, and other mechanisms that we can develop will greatly help countries like Bangladesh, and we need to work together to build them to our success. Thank you, everybody. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Tasfiya. Ola.
Hadn't unmuted myself, I should know. I teach mainly online, so I've got two roles that introduce Fahad to myself. One is I'm a research-focused academic at Central Queensland University, focusing on regional and rural health in particular, but also education. And my night job, my other job for which I don't get paid, is I'm head of country in Bangladesh for a long-standing NGO number 99 with the NGO Bureau, called Fred Hyde Schools. And so we run 57 schools and kindergartens in the lower Delta region area, where traditionally infrastructure is very poor and it's very difficult to get educational assets in place. So we've got close to 8,000 kids in full-time education in that region. I should just add that I'm a social psychologist, so that's one of my biases. And I also, in my role, I do a lot of impact assessment, mainly social impact assessment, but also economic impact assessment. And so that bias will probably shine through in some of my answers, Fahad.
Thanks, Alaf. Nick?
Thanks, Fahad, and greetings from Sydney. My name's Nick Gorrell. I'm a social entrepreneur. I'm working to establish a social business in the ready-made garment industry in Bangladesh, a factory where workers will earn a fair wage above the current minimums, where they will earn a share of profits and have a workplace that is designed to be about maximizing their well-being and their livelihoods. So that makes me quite excited to be involved in anything related to impact investing in Bangladesh, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks, Nick. Rahul?
Hello, everyone. I'm Rahul Matthew. I handle business development, communications, and strategic partnerships for World Vision in Bangladesh. World Vision is a child-focused international nonprofit, for those of you who do not know. I've been in the sector for 15 years, working across social impact through innovative partnerships and sustainable development. So what I bring to board on this particular panel is that nonprofit perspective of how do we leverage data-driven tools like population-weighted assets under management for equitable and transformative change. So I'm quite excited about this discussion. Over to you, Farhad.
Thank you very much, panel. And thank you very much for the participants who are actually part of this forum. This is an history-making forum because no one has discussed this topic in such a webinar. So I will, without spending any more time, I will go straight to the question time. My first question to Assistant Professor Tasfiya Tasneem Ahmed. Tasfiya, what do you think is a rationale for having a population weighted data or index? You know your time limits.
Yes.
Go for it.
Thank you so much, Farhad, for the question. As we know that impact investment has gained significant momentum in these days, the impact investment works for we do not only account for financial returns, but also we want to see what are the social and environment and other impacts. So now, as the world has had so much improvements in impact investment, this is now high time that we we develop other measurements that this impact, how much impact is being generated and to whom this impact is being generated. Usually impact investment index or funds represent financial returns and other impact specific returns without taking into factor specific population weights. However, for countries such as Bangladesh and other African and Asian countries with having a large population, which has our large population accounts for significant challenges for us. This is important for us, not only knowing the volume of the fund, but also we need to know the potential reach of the fund and the whole investments. I want to shed light with an example to you. Imagine that we are investing $1 billion in renewable energy projects in any country, such as country A. So if the country has two regions, in region A, there can be 10 million inhabitants, and in region B, there may be 1 million inhabitants. And if the total fund size is 500 million, and we would probably, without using a population weight index, if you tell me, I may probably allocate 250 and 250 million to both the regions. However, the first region having 10 million populations may have a higher need for the fund for having renewable energy projects, and they can have higher poverty. So we need to take into account not only this aggregated metric, but also other breakdowns such as needs and population sizes, so that we can ensure a better outcome. So I gathered a number from the GIIN that the Global Impact Investing Network, according to them, the impact investment market is now estimated at 1.571 trillion USD with 21% compounded annual growth rate over 5 years. However, if we look into this with an inequality scale, you will probably find that most of the impact funds goes to urban centers or the centers which are already affluent. But what happens to other regions which are already in need? So this is important that when investors are investing in an impact fund, they needs to know, they needs to have better index to have this population weights mechanisms in place, so that we can better know where that these funds are going. There, let's say, if I am investing on an impact fund which focuses on education. This is important that it does not only account just on aggregate education sector of a country, but also specific education. For example, due to climate change, many of coastal regions of Bangladesh will be hit hard by several natural disasters, and many children will be affected in terms of their education, high dropout rates, health and other several problems they will face. In this context, if we just invest on education sector of Bangladesh in total, in aggregate, this is not important. If you establish on schooling infrastructure in Bangladesh for a coastal school, probably the population weighted measure will give you a much higher impact, because because one school or one infrastructure in a coastal region compared to a city where already, yes, climate change will also affect cities. However, the population weighted effects in the coastal areas of Bangladesh will have higher needs. However, general or traditional AUM measures, that asset under management measures, does not take into factor this kind of factors such as population weighted, but we call for such measures, because if you take into account these other impact measurements, we have now a lot of impact measurement system, but but a closer look reveals discrepancies in this population weighted system. So we may generate impressive returns for impact funds and investments, but it is very crucial to ask if these returns are concentrated among highly privileged or those who had other access, or whether these funds are getting reaching those vulnerable communities and transforming the lives of those who have a need to get this investment. So from there, this population weighted system, a population weighted mechanism will help the impact investment, and also it will help policymakers. It will lead us develop more inclusive fiscal policies, financial policies, and if we develop a population weighted measures, other outcomes such as for corporate sectors as well, when they disburse their CSR initiatives, if they use a population weighted system, all of the development and other impact systems will reach a broader potential impact investing receivers. So from this point of view, we really need a population weighted system, and I want to appreciate NAB Bangladesh and ANDE for this system, because developing countries or other markets, we may not understand this at first. However, for developing and emerging markets like us with population and other significant nuanced developmental challenges, if we take into account this population weighted system, our whole development measurement and our whole impact ecosystem will be greatly benefited. So yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tasfia. And now next question to Olav. Olav, Tasfia mentioned about the importance of population weighted data. Are there similar matrices that uses population weighted data to assess impact or to deliver policy and or services? You mentioned that you do a lot of impact reporting and things like that. So the question to you is, are there similar matrices? Olav.
Yeah, just trying to pick and choose, Fahad, because there are so many metrics out there that are designed to do something like this. I think the uniqueness of population-weighted approaches, though, is that, it takes context into account more greatly than typical impact assessment. So, it's easy for me to answer the question by saying, things like SROI, which is social return on investment, is something that is not so much population weighted, but population context weighted, weighted to the particular context in which it happens. But rather than just give that quick and easy answer, I'd like the audience to think about some of the other well-known or reasonably well-known metrics that talk about population uniqueness and population context. So things like, for example, local carbon footprints, the Transparency International's work on corruption and governance, Credit Suisse Wealth Index is one that's, really classically population weighted. Este's weighted index of social progress is a particularly good one. I might touch on that a little bit later, but one that most of you will have heard of is the Big Mac index. And it's a little bit controversial because, it's designed to compare apples with apples, or, French fries with French fries all around the world. And it's really about parity in terms of purchasing power. But I think what the Big Mac index inadvertently does is expose the power to which context can be literally a bit of a killer. So, for example, in India, where some of our audience are coming from, a Big Mac, or the equivalent of a Big Mac, costs around 520 rupees, let's say. But the poverty line in India would be around 1,200 rupees a month. So that means effectively a poor person in India can afford 2 Big Macs, maybe a munch from a third Big Mac in a month. That's all they can afford. Now let's have a look where I come from, Australia. Unemployment benefit, I had to check, but you get around $1,500 roughly per month in Australia. A Big Mac in Australia costs $5.90. So in other words, you could buy 250 Big Macs in a month if you were sitting on the poverty line in Australia. On the poverty line in Australia, or the poverty line in India. 2 Big Macs, 250 Big Macs. Huge difference. In fact, in Australia, you could eat 8 bad quality burgers a day, if that's what you choose to do with your money, and do that with your income that you get on the very minimum income that's available in Australia. It's the basement level of income. So I guess that, just to kick things off from my point of view, what I like about the population weighted approach, and there's all sorts of different metrics we can draw on for it, is that it draws in the importance of understanding the local context. Population, just numbers, just let's say putting in the numerator 1 million or 10 million, as Tasvia did, that's the start, but it's not enough, because 10 million in Dhaka is very different to 10 million in Mexico City or 10 million in London. Like the context is extraordinarily different.
Now, thank you very much, Olaf, for those examples and those things that you just mentioned. In line with Olaf's answer, I would like to go to Rahul, Dr. Rahul. Rahul, now we have heard from Assistant Professor Tasvia and Professor Olaf. What could be the rationale, a concrete rationale, for population-weighted asset under management to complement impact investment? I know that you have done a lot of impact-related work on the ground through World Vision. So what would be a rationale for population-weighted asset under management to complement impact investment? Rahul.
Thank you, Farad, and thank you for that question about rationale. I think we have heard my previous speakers, Olaf, as well as Tasvia, to talk about some of the rationale as well. Let me dive straight into it. So, because I feel there's a great promise of how we can actually transform impact investment. We have heard that it is probably $1.57 trillion worth of impact investment that's going in. But as a non-profit leader, I have seen both opportunities and gaps. So traditionally, these investments are going to places where we have very quick returns. But what about these densely populated, underserved regions where the need is the greatest? And I think that is where population-weighted assets under management will actually shine, because it takes into consideration the population size, the unmet needs. It also bridges the gap between capital and communities, so which prioritizes areas which are often overlooked. So for example, let us take an example in any part of rural South Asia. A small investment in education could actually uplift thousands of children. But we need data to guide such decisions. And that is where this would come exactly into the picture and add value. Now, taking in picture what Olaf mentioned earlier, now add SROI into the mix. So while population-weighted assets under management actually shows where the investment should go, SROI actually will measure the value created. So the jobs, the health, the education, and the economic gains. So together, I think they would add a lot more value, especially looking at scale and the outcomes. So I'll give you an example. In some of our work that we do, we call them learning routes, and we have 600 of those learning route centers across Bangladesh. We have estimated that our social returns of investment is around 28.74. So for every 1 taka that we are investing, we are getting a return of close to 30 taka. So imagine that if you're able to get population-weighted assets under management, it would actually be a win-win. So I think it aligns very specifically with the human needs, and adding SROI would actually ensure accountability. So it brings a lot of systematic and sustainable change. I do think this is very useful, both for investors as well as governments, and also for nonprofits. I think especially for investors, it actually aligns funding with the real impact. For governments, it actually prioritizing policies based on population needs, and also for nonprofits, because it can help us to advocate better for funding, that this is the data and this is where investments are required. So I think it's time with how we shift this conversation to see how actually impact investment is not just about financial returns, but in investing in the people and their future. So from my lens, if we are able to align both population-weighted AUM along with SROI, we can ensure that every investment actually counts and it really goes to where it matters the most. Over to you.
Thank you very much Thank you very much, Rahul, for your content. We are having a little bit of difficulties in reaching Nick. I think there is a little bit of technical hiccup with Nick's connections. But meanwhile, before going to Nick, I'll come back to Assistant Professor Tasfia again. Tasfia, population weighted asset under management. How can it influence the outcomes of impact investment? We have heard from now you, Professor Olaf, and also from Rahul. So, how can it influence the outcomes of impact investment? Tasfia.
Thank you, Farhad, for the question. As Olaf and Rahul was mentioning that we would need to design better systems, and I'll pick on Rahul's point that we need to have better data to see. So when we have this objective that now we are weighting population to assess impacts of impact investments, in this process, we will be coming up with stronger data systems. Okay, so that will help us to prioritize high need areas, areas that needs to be prioritized more than others. So we will be able to identify those areas better, because now we know that we need to give population weights. So in that data calculation system, we will be coming up with more other information that will help us. Secondly, I would like to mention about targeted interventions. So we were talking about education, as Olaf and Rahul were talking as well. So for example, education, we want to, we were investing on educational sector of our region. So when we will work on that education with their population weights, we will be able to know them better. And in this process, we will know what targeted interventions, such as maybe infrastructure or maybe any programs such as Learning Roots of World Vision, an ECDI program. So in this outcome, in this process, several outcomes we will be coming up with, such as targeted intervention, prioritizing, identifying and prioritizing high need areas. I can think of other outcomes as well. For example, increased accountability, because now we are population weighting the asset under management. So as data will be available to us, and it has the potential to make things more transparent, and it will give us auditable data as well. So there will be less bias, less influence, and less political favoritism, hopefully. And because we will be able to gauge what is the before and after impacts. So there can be another outcome that I think of that will be built in this process, such as measurement system. This other than increased accountability, now when we implement a population weighted system, we will be able to have granular insights on regions, on high needy areas, and this will help us develop impact measurement system by revealing disparities that many regions may need or may not, because we can come up with baseline analysis. Without doing baseline analysis, we will probably not start with a population weighting index. Then we can compare the baseline data with the mid-level data and final data. So this way we can develop pre-investment and post-investment measures. So we will be having a holistic system if we adopt a population weight management system, because that will help us develop better solutions, targeted interventions, accountability systems, and better impact measurement system. It will also help us gather broken down, disaggregated data, which is a major problem of emerging countries and South Asia as well. We are talking about inequality all the time, but we have aggregate GDP, aggregate asset under management. We need disaggregated data, and population weighted asset under management will give us better insights, and it will come up with other in finance we call spillover effects. Maybe we will be coming up with other stronger measures that actually help us in building the whole impact investment ecosystem. So it will greatly benefit impact investment and other regional inequality specific concerns as well. So yeah.
Thank you, Tasya. We have got Nick back. Nick, the question that we wanted to ask you, that we have been listening about population weighted uh, asset under management and focusing impact investment. Can you guide us through or take us through some advantages and disadvantages of such a model or such an index, Nick?
Of course. Thank you, Fahad, and thank you everyone for your patience. My internet service chose an impeccable moment to disconnect me, but thankfully I'm back. So thanks for the question. Yes, first, what I love about this is that population-weighted asset under management for impact investment index, quite a mouthful, is it's an example of the emerging market in Asia influencing definitions, decisions, and the very objectives that are relevant to it. This is a tremendous advantage, in my view, in the endeavor to improve people's lives. Historically, one of the major criticisms of the entire project of international development is that despite what are often good intentions, the reality is it is often problems that are defined by, solutions that are designed by, and programs that are imposed by the global north on the global south. According to paradigms and objectives and standards of the global north, and ultimately often to the global north's benefit. So the population-weighted asset under management, by contrast, is an inspired statement of self-determination, I think, from the emerging markets of Asia, and that's wonderful. Secondly, in a similar vein, the idea of evaluating the success and even the worthiness of a business venture or investment according not only to its balance sheet, but to how does it serve and benefit the people where it operates. As a social entrepreneur, this is music to my ears. One imagines an index like this influencing or supplementing the very crude and not very telling metric of gross domestic product, which is still the holy grail in planning and evaluating economies. Yet it treats $1 billion investment into cancer treatment the same way as it treats $1 billion investment into tobacco production. So abandoning this profit-only paradigm is, again, a very powerful statement from emerging markets about what is important to them. Some other advantages, I think, that it's regionally inclusive. It ensures a fairer representation of impact investments by taking each region's population size into account. It helps prevent smaller regions from being overlooked and gives a more balanced and equitable distribution of investments potentially. It provides better context by showing how impact investments align with the size of the population, making it easier to gauge the actual reach and significance of these investments in the different regions, and offering a clearer picture of their scale and effectiveness.
Thanks, Nick. We'll come back to the regional question, Nick. Before that, I would like to go to Olav in reference to Nick's advantages and disadvantages. Olav, can you please share some known or tested methods that may have synergies with the proposed population-weighted asset under management associated with impact investment? We'll come back to you, Nick, with the regional question. Olav.
Thanks, Fahad. And I must admit, I'm going to be a little bit of a politician and answer the question that I wish I was asked rather than one that you asked me. Look, from statistical point of view, population-weighted approaches are not new, of course, you know. So we do quite a lot of that. And so if you think about an example from Bangladesh, Dhaka is a city that's very large, you know, one of the largest cities in the world, and it has a range of advantages and disadvantages for its residents that's quite different to the advantages and disadvantages of living, for example, in remote regions like Rolla, where I work. So, you know, for example, you have much better access to education in Dhaka. You have much better access to a small pool, but a significant pool of white-collar jobs. But you also are subject to terrible dust and other forms of pollution and noise and difficulty with traffic and, you know, that kind of thing. So, whereas if you live in the rural and remote areas where I work, there's some advantages of those areas. It's very rural and remote, so if you need health services, it's hard to get. If you need educational access, it's hard to get. But you can grow chickens and you can have vegetables outside your house. So I think that, you know, I guess one of the points I'm making here, Fahad, is that just thinking about population, as I'm sort of repeating myself a little bit here, but just thinking about population numbers is not enough. And we're going to have to build in a fair bit of nuance in relation to the context. And the problem with that is it starts to build subjectivity and judgment into these indexes. So these indexes typically, you know, SROI or, you know, impact investment measures are always, they sound good and we look for nice ratios, but they are very rubbery and full of subjective content. I'm reasonably confident that we can improve on that subjectivity. I'll give you one quick example before I go. So relatively recent one is the social vulnerability metric. It's a new public health tool, and a bit similar to other public health tools. They use things like education, health, employment status, a lot of factors that are actually very closely related to money, you know, to wealth, to income. Some of them are not. So, for example, gender and race. You can't buy your way out of your gender or race. But those aspects that are modifiable, those particular multiple factors, you can build them into a single metric, and that metric is able to predict life and death to the tune of 50%. So we can predict life and death, how long you will live. Roughly 50% of the variance in how long you will live is predictable by many of these measurable, objectively measurable factors. So I do have some optimism that we can draw on some of these approaches and build an index that will have some, you know, quite, rigor, significant rigor to it. And I think, as Tasvia says, if we can do that, then we can start directing money more effectively and fairly to areas of need.
Thank you, Olaf. I think that was very good. Now, Nick, I'm coming back to you with that regional part. That actually, is there a way that the population-weighted AUM index could compare regions and rank those in terms of effective use of the allocated asset or resources? The link that we took you off to go to Olaf at that point of time. So is there a way? Nick?
Sure, and obviously ranking the regions could help compare how different areas are doing in terms of impact investing, taking into account the size of their population and the amount of asset under management. So there's a method you could use, a step-by-step process. Obviously, first would be to calculate the population-weighted AUM for the region. You would need to sort these data based on the population-weighted AUM, and then assign some rankings. The region with the highest AUM would get rank 1 and so on. You could work out ways to handle if there was a tie, whether you accept that or find some other way, like the overall size of the population, to sort out between two AUMs that are tied. Interpreting the rankings, I think, is important here to see what they tell you. Regions with higher rankings would have a larger AUM relative to their population size, which could mean they have a stronger impact investment scene. By contrast, regions with lower ranks might not have as much impact investing per person. And you could, help to illustrate this with visualizations, charts and graphs and so on. But you'd want to take a closer look, I think, at these rankings to see how they fit into your research or goals, and think about what the rankings say about how impact investments are spread out and whether they align with certain investment strategies. And you would, of course, need to keep the rankings updated by recalculating the population-weighted AUM. Of course, asset under management is a fluid thing, so you'd need to keep on top of that and to track things as they change over time. Testing the sensitivity as well. I think it's a good idea to check how changes in data or methodology could affect the rankings, and would help you understand how robust your rankings really are. And other factors too, like while population-weighted AUM is useful, it might also be helpful to think about other factors and other impact metrics or qualitative assessments.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much. And before going to the participants' question, I just have one last question to Rahul. Dr. Rahul, uh, for population weighted asset under management, asset with impact investment, can you please share some of the risk and what can be some approaches to mitigate those risk and mitigation? Dr. Rahul.
Thanks, Farad. So, I mean, I am talking from a very generalist and in my limited understanding, these are some of the risks that I can think of. The first one will be data quality and availability. I think that would be a very important risk, especially about population, demographics, investment flows. Some of the places it's either scarce, sometimes it is very unreliable. So that could actually lead to misallocation of investment. I think that will be a major risk that I can think of in developing economies. So we should probably look at partnering with governments, research institutions, NGOs to be able to have more robust data. I think also using latest technology, AI, big data that we can see and machine learning also could be very interesting of how we could actually mitigate some of these as well. The second thing that I can think of is weighting bias. So when we say population weighted, we are looking at only population. So unintentionally, we can overshadow someone who was much smaller. What Tasfia's example was 10 million population to the 1 million population, but they might be highly vulnerable. So how do you actually create a more balanced weighting model of including also vulnerability indicators? A third risk that I can think about is how do you measure social impact? So while we say there are other metrics that we have used like iris and stuff like that, but how do you standardize these metrics? But how do you actually make sure that these metrics do not actually have a more of a financial value or financial viewpoint? And also, how do you also look at the social returns is quite important that we look at. The fourth risk that I can think of is resistance from stakeholders itself, because it is quite complex. It actually deviates from traditional financial metrics. So there could be a lot of resistance in it as well. So, but we have to create, just like impact investment in itself, creating a lot more awareness, doing some more pilots, showcasing examples of successful investment, I think could be some ways to mitigate some of it. Another risk that I can think of it is actually high implementation cost, because from the research to the actual technical infrastructure to do something like this will actually mean a lot more higher costs as well. So we should be looking at blended funding models, looking at pilot projects of sorts, and even probably looking at open source platforms of how we can actually reduce some of those technology costs. More recently, we were looking at mapping. People invest a lot of money on ArcGIS, but the same thing we could do it at a fraction of a cost on open source mapping. So things like that could make a lot of difference. And the last risk that I can think of is geopolitical instability. And that is an important killer risk that could happen. But I think there is enough actors in the space that we have to, how do you connect with the local communities? How do you actually build between investors and underserved populations? I think it's a very useful and important metric within the impact investment space.
Thank you, Rahul. We will go back to our questions. We do have some questions, as we can see, and before that, we obviously discussed three elements under this topic. One is population, then asset under management, and number three is impact investment. So the first question is to Assistant Professor Tasfia. Tasfia, the question you can see is that how do we address the challenges of ensuring inclusivity in population-weighted impact measurement mechanism, especially in regions with diverse socioeconomic dynamics? Excellent question. Tasfia, once Tasfia is finished, please feel free, other panel members, to put comments on that question. Tasfia.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zubair, for the excellent question. So yes, I do agree that addressing inclusivity concerns in region with diverse socioeconomic dynamics is actually challenging. So Rahul was mentioning about challenges. So when we work on addressing those challenges, some of these inclusivity concerns will be addressed. In this context, I was mentioning about data. So we can use data to identify marginalized communities. So we can use disaggregated demographic and socioeconomic data to identify underrepresented populations within the region and what works for them and what doesn't. I want to recommend another context, that is we can engage local stakeholders. So our development partners and some of our policymakers use this approach to include community leaders, local governments, and NGOs in the decision-making process and in utilizing the investment strategies. And they are quite successful. So if we can engage local stakeholders, we can address this inclusivity challenge, especially in regions with diverse socioeconomic dynamics. Nevertheless, we also have to tailor investment strategies. Okay, so investments, sometimes valuations as well, valuation and investments, they are very subjective. We know, we have talked about this in this panel as well. So we have to design projects that actually address the diverse needs of that subpopulation or that socioeconomic group. For instance, programs such as women's financial inclusion, maybe that region has women who are female populations who are not inclusive financially. So we have to have a tailored, we have to have our investment strategy that can be tailored, and then we can adopt a population weighted approach. And lastly, we can incorporate cultural sensitivity in this as well, especially in regions where cultural sensitivity is an issue. For example, when we engage local stakeholders as well. So this way, after tailoring our approach, and we have to monitor as well. We have to monitor, evaluate, and promote these public-private partnerships as well. I think after doing all this, we can actually have things in place, dynamics in place that can address the challenges of ensuring inclusivity. Excellent question again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tasfia. I think you are absolutely right. A blanket solution is not the solution. I saw Rahul nodding his head quite a few times, and he is one of the worker on the ground. And I'm pretty sure on a daily basis, he's facing this sort of diversified community. Rahul, do you have any comments from your work experience towards that question? Rahul.
Thanks, Farad. I think I do agree. When we look at these impact investments, we usually look at quality is there, but I think how do we get better quality is going to be important. And how do you actually work with local communities, what Tasfia mentioned? How do you engage with local communities? How do you take those into consideration and just not standardize metrics? I think that is where the challenge is. How do you contextualize these metrics?
Excellent. Olav, do you have any comments on this diversified community? How do we manage that issue?
Yeah, you know, the whole process of impact assessment, just to go back to that point, is about assigning a number. And once you assign that number in a league table or a ratio, it has a solidity that sounds really impressive, and you can take that to investors, and you can take it to government as well. Governments are ready to be lied to by people like us, because they just want to know that the money that they've got, the taxes that they're spending, is going to work. And you can do a very bad impact assessment, and they'll still be grateful for it. I also really like the comment or the question about the question of quality, because that's one that, from a personal perspective, is one that I'm thinking about a lot. So, I mentioned we had 8,000 roughly children in in full-time education at the moment, and with a very small budget, by the way. So our total budget is roughly $450,000, and so it's roughly $50 to $60 per child. So it's fabulous value. You know, it's great value, but one of the questions I keep asking is quantity is great. You know, the numerator and the denominator have a nice feel to them. Not much money, lots of impact. But at the end of the day, I'm starting to worry about, is that good enough? Is the quality good enough? Because are we really changing lives with the education that we're delivering? I'd like to believe, I tell myself when I go to sleep at night, that I am making a difference.
We do.
But yeah, and it's a really good question.
No, thank you very much, Olaf. Now we have got a few more questions. Another question that to directly to Nick. Nick, what should be the role of local communities and investment entities in shaping the investment in Southeast Asia as an emerging market? Role of communities and investment entities. Nick.
Thanks, Farhad, and thanks for the question. Look, I could at best try and answer this question in general terms. I certainly don't pretend to be an expert on Southeast Asia, but I would think in those general terms that a community, by collaborating with different community groups, by engaging whatever entities you have access to, NGOs, local governments, businesses, academia, even if that's possible, to consult together and to advocate and be clear about what your needs are, about what you hope to achieve by seeking impact investment. What are the challenges that impact investment can help with, and equally be clear about what solutions might attract impact investment, meaning an initiative that will generate both social impact and a financial return.
No, that's good. Anyone else has got any comments on that? Rahul or Olaf or Tasfia? Because that's also a good question.
Yeah, it's a challenging question, so I'll let it go to the umpire or to the keeper.
All right. No, that's fine. And we do have another very interesting question, I would say. It's about a behavioral change. And we all know that what we are talking about a behavioral change, particularly among the investors. We know the definition of impact investment. It is an investment which has got a social impact, environmental impact, and at the same time has financial return. And it can be monitored through a set of measurable indicators within a governance. So the question is, how do we change the behavior in the community, impact investors to play a role accordingly to support the population? How do we change the behavior in the community? Anyone from the panel, please. I'll start with Tasfia. Tasfia?
Excellent question. I'd really be keen to answer that. We are trying to, Farhad and Rahul, other members as well, that at NAB we were working on building a ESG ecosystem for us, impact investment ecosystem for us, and we had a roundtable discussion last year as well. So in this 1.5 years of working with NAB, I have realized that probably investor behavior is the most significant obstacle or challenge. Okay, so what happens, I can speak for Bangladesh or maybe other emerging markets, that investors seldom believe in financial markets, especially in Bangladesh. We do acknowledge, our people do acknowledge that we have many challenges, but they probably are not willing to accept now that impact investment and other investments such as capital market funds, SRI funds, they can actually solve the problem. They mostly and mainly work on policymakers and the government. So we need to shift this perspective from the investor. First problem that is very structural, first solution that will be developing the market and having 1 or 2 investments that is working on the platform, and and convincing and showing. Rahul was talking about measurement system and data reliability. We need reliable data and show and have examples that shows that yes, impact investment is working and population weight will also work. And this behavioral issue does not only go for investors as well, for corporates and populations, because they will be part of the whole ecosystem, right? There are many players in the ecosystem. Those who will receive, their behavior can also be challenging. At BIGM, we have our associate director here, maybe Dr. Sultan Ahmed. So at BIGM, we were talking about developing a targeted intervention. We asked fund from the Ministry of Environment, and we did face challenges to the end of those who were about to receive the renewable energy initiative. They were asking, why are we having this investment, and that maybe we will not use it. Will we have to pay a price that is higher than the market rate? So they were reluctant as well. So behavior is something where we need to work on, and I believe that example can help us a lot, and other things such as that the approach that worked for microfinance in Bangladesh. Okay, counseling and working on business attitude, overall attitude of the investors, investees, corporate and policymakers, to make them understand what are the true impacts of the impact investment and population weighted measures. So yes, I agree, behavior is a concern, but I also agree and believe that it can be overcome. Thank you.
I think thank you very much, Tasfia. I think we are pretty much confident that behavioral change will happen the moment we can share some examples, and we need to actually get the low-hanging fruits to demonstrate how the whole impact investment ecosystem is working. Yes, Bangladesh is a new country. The whole of South Asia, except probably India and Pakistan, we are all new into this ecosystem. So I'll give you, we have come to the end of the session. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds each to fulfill with a concluding remark, focusing on population weighted asset under management associated with impact investment. I'll start with Nick. Nick, your half a minute of fame. You are on mute, Nick. You have to unmute yourself.
Apologies.
Yes.
There we go. Put me on the spot, and I left myself on mute. I think as has kind of been touched on, this idea of population weighted asset under management has incredible value potential, but if it can be incorporate other aspects as part of the calculation that are a little bit more nuanced, other than just the one-dimensional aspect of population, that can more accurately reflect the true impact of investments, then I think it has huge potential. If it can, it seems to focus very well on the breadth of impact of investments. But if we can start to touch and identify the depth and make distinguishing evaluations there, then I think it has tremendous potential.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Nick. I'll come to Professor Olav. Olav.
Thanks, Fahad. I've been thinking about this term, population weighted, and I suspect that what I'm sort of pushing or nudging us towards is thinking about it maybe as population sensitive asset under management approaches. So sensitive to the population and to the population context. The other one thing I would say is just to respond to that question, that last question about behavioural change. The thing that's wonderful about impact investing is that it, unlike a lot of efforts to impact on the real world, and as a psychologist, I always despair at how hard it is to change the real world, but impact investing does, because it sets up new factories, it provides new products, it employs more people, it does physical things that really do change the world. So I actually worry less about impact investing, as I worry less at night, does it change the world? It does. The only question, of course, is does it do it? And it does it sustainably too, because there's nothing more sustainable than the human desire to make a living, you know, to make a profit, even greed is incredibly sustainable, unlike some human emotions, So it will be sustained. It is sustainable. It does change the world. The only question is, does it do it in a positive way? So again, being very sensitive to what impact assessment does to the communities in which it pokes its fingers. I think that's that's the key question.
Thank you very much. Rahul, your half a minute of fame, the concluding fame.
Thanks, Farad. I mean, this has been a very engaging discussion for me. I think I've learned a lot more than before the discussion. But I think when I look at the population weighted assets under management, I think we should just move away from just thinking of it as metrics. And I like what Olaf mentioned about being population sensitive. So I think that is what talking about being real progress and not just about money flows. And I think it's a great opportunity. But the biggest challenge for me is awareness. And how do you actually create that sense of understanding across the entire ecosystem? Having been here for the last 18 months, I do feel that the amount of awareness and impact investment and adding to the complexities of social returns and population weighted assets under management, I think we need to show and tell, and there'll be a lot more awareness that is required within the ecosystem, which would actually help in doing a lot more impact. Or else, in many times when we work in the nonprofit sector, there's a lot of failed aid examples, and having something like this would actually be more sustainable and more impactful as well. But we need to really showcase in examples and also ensure that people are able to have more awareness of how the market is moving and changing as well.
Thank you, Rahul. Tasvia, your 30 seconds, half a minute.
Thanks, Farhad. I want to say at last that we live in an era with highly complex social challenges, and impact investment and other indexes, they are already quite complex. However, we cannot address enough about the importance of population weighted and other disaggregated measures. So we agree that there are high costs associated with it, high challenges, data, and we have to take into account many other factors. But it is high time that we developed a metric, and we do, as Rahul was mentioning, we have to go beyond than just taking it as a metric, but we have to develop a whole ecosystem that takes into account the whole population and cultural and other impact of any investment. Thank you, Farhad.
Thank you very much, Tasvia, and thank you very much, our participants, and thank you very much, everybody. Thanks to our adventurous panel members and for all of your active participation. This is the scenario where we need to intervention from the impact investment policy. Population-weighted policy is not new, as we have heard. It has extensive usage in delivering infrastructure, health, housing, and educational services. Some governments do use it for allocating grants for social and environmental development, while due to the rapid growth of global population index is now being used as one of the key decision-making tools in major programs and projects. The policymakers have already reinforced the interdependence between population, planet, prosperity, and investment. However, the unknown, unaddressed, unsolved, unanswered, like Star Trek, as I have mentioned before, questions for the 21st century are: what is it about additional people and demography that make them a stimulus to impact investment? Number two, what sort of investment shall our children depend on for future engagement and employment? And question number three, should the government alone cope with rising population, or the impact investment movement has a role? With this context and background, the Bangladesh National Advisory Board for Impact Investment, as part of the GSG Asia Pacific Net, would like to propose the development of an impact investment index that utilizes a population-weighted approach to measure and assess the asset under management associated with the impact investment. And today is just the beginning of the journey of an evolution process to deliver a revolution. Yes, as you have heard today, the development of population-weighted asset under management impact investment index has the potential to revolutionize the way impact investments are evaluated, measured, and promoted. Let's drive this agenda within our own capacity with a common focus and the transform population-weighted asset under management as a tipping point for global impact investment agenda. Because we are not good until we all are good. The impact investment mantra. Thank you, and keep population in your mind. Keep impact investing in your mind. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks from our end as well. And Farhad Bhai, look forward to working with you and this erudite panel in the year ahead. Support you in meeting those goals that you've articulated here. Also requesting attendees to please join us tomorrow. We have an entire day focused on impact investing in Bangladesh. We'd like to take some of these conversations on there. Please also do respond to the poll. It will help us get better next year and see what else we can do to make sure that you keep coming back and that we keep working together. With those few words, thank you very, very much and see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.